People used to ask me if I was like shameful that, where I blamed myself for the stillbirth. Do you ever blame yourself? And I was like, no, why would I blame myself? You never stop grieving. But also, I've learned so much. But the first thing I did was I tried to find women who had stillbirth to talk to them about how did you live through this? How did you get out of the storm? People,
Hi, Jen. Thank you very much for joining us today. And I guess we'll start with me stealing the question,
Mhm.
and I will ask you to tell me a story.
Yeah, well, there's so many stories I could tell, but I guess as it relates, to this podcast and why I'm here. Let's see, 14 years ago, I had a stillborn baby. Um she was born in between my first son and my third child, also a son. Um we had a completely pretty much normal pregnancy with her, and around 2 days around her due date, I went into the hospital because I was having contractions and I didn't know maybe she's coming early. And they put me on a monitor and they said nothing's happening. Come back. And so that evening I went to sleep and I woke up and in the middle of the night, it was maybe like 2 o'clock in the morning, and I remember thinking she hasn't moved at all. And so you know, like touched my belly and she didn't move. And then I went and drank some juice and she didn't move. And then I called the nurse and she said, get in the bathtub. I'm sure it's fine. So I got in the bathtub. And next thing you know, I'm in labor. So I go to the hospital and then they hooked me up to the monitors and they said, your baby has died. And so that was a pretty traumatic experience. I think stillbirth is the most traumatic experience a woman can have. So they say, it's not really good to be measuring people's traumas, but it forever changed my life. Obviously, I'm definitely not the person I was that day, nor the person I was before she came. Um, so yeah, pretty traumatic experience, but and we can talk about this. I continue to try to use that experience as inspiration and um anyway, so yeah, that's my brief story.
Right. What do you think now, like retrospectively, how it changed you? What changed?
Yeah, I'm like a little emotional, but
Yeah. And thank you very much for sharing this. I know it's hard to tell about
it's
your.
okay because I feel like there's a lot of women who experience this and it's too hard to do what I'm doing. And I have women reach out to me a lot saying like, wow, you're this established scientist and you're living your truth in public.
Mm,
um like my human heart misses her, of course, and would love to know like what she would be like and all those things. But then if I'm completely honest, my insides, my soul knows that, she's still present. And so that's what makes it emotional sometimes, is because it's this back and forth between those two things. But I carried the weight of this grief for a very long time in a negative way. You never stop grieving. Grief is a very heavy thing, I feel like, but and you never stop, like no matter what. 14 years, it feels like yesterday, and I can remember everything as if it was yesterday. Um, but also, I've learned so much. So after I had her, my I did a few things, but the first thing I did was I tried to find women who had stillbirth to talk to them about like, oh my goodness, this happened to me. Like, how did you live through this? How did you get out of the storm? And there were women at different stages of getting out of that. And so they would share their experiences with me. And then I started going to therapy, but that didn't really work very well for me. I loved my therapist. She was my therapist prior to having the stillborn baby. But I look back and I don't think she really, grief wasn't her expertise. She was amazing. I have nothing negative to say about her. She just doesn't, she didn't really know grief.
Mhm.
Um, so I started going to yoga, and that's where things started to change for me. Um, I started to like have a relationship with myself and focus internally about what had happened. And then I was able to like start letting go of all the hurt and sadness. But um, I think the biggest blessing that I've taken from this and I've actually done self work with is being a better mom to my kids that are living. And, there's so much that kids teach you every day. You have to pay attention. And it's really not about them. It's really about your relationship with yourself and how you want to show up for your kids. When you're disciplining a child, we think it's about them and what they're doing and what they're not doing, and but it's not. It's about how am I going to, you know, be in this situation, because we have our stories, our beliefs, our past experiences, like my daughter, the things that we grew up with, and that's how we respond
Right.
from those things, where it's really pushed me to think about internally. So I'd say the biggest blessing that's come from it is like the type of mom I am to my children. Um, it's yeah, I'm slower. I make sure that I'm paying attention, and I don't know, before my daughter, I was on the fast track to being the best of the best I could be. And I still have that desire, but I also have to go to soccer games. So, those things are important, or basketball at 4 o'clock when there's
Yeah,
work to get done.
that's so true. When I had a baby, as I've lost my mom when I was 7, I felt that I had to be the best mom. And it's not really possible because, I mean, I'm a human being. And how were you handling all of it? How to be a mom and to be yourself.
Oh,
And
yeah, forget about it. Yeah.
yeah,
The pregnancy with my youngest, Nolan, he's 12, was horrible. I mean, I loved being pregnant. I always have. Like, I just turned 50, and I would be pregnant in a second. I mean, having a baby is the most beautiful thing a woman's body does. It's just amazing. I loved every moment of it. And I was scared he was going to die the entire pregnancy. It was horrible. Like, I was seeing my yoga teacher in private, meditating a lot with my yoga teacher. Um, I was very stressed out. Interestingly, my OBGYN team, there was a gentleman that was on the team, because of course I was now at the med center. I was in Nebraska, so I was at University of Nebraska Medical Center being overseen during that pregnancy, because nobody knew why the stillbirth happened. None of the tests came back of any showing anything.
right,
And so I had to go very regularly and weekly in the last, trimester. But so one of the doctors there, he was awesome. There was another doctor though that had had a stillborn baby at 36 weeks. And
okay,
she shared her personal story with me, and she told me that she didn't really share it with too many people. But she wanted me to have um, she wanted me to basically induce at 36 weeks.
right,
And one part of me was like, oh, that would be amazing. I don't have to do this anymore. Just get the baby out and he's alive, and that's all I care about. But then
right,
the other part of me was like, but this is not Rain, my daughter Rain. Nolan, we knew what we were naming him, was not Rain. So
right,
I have to let him develop. I have to trust this process. I don't really have a choice. And so I did not induce until I think I was like 39 weeks. And
Mm-hmm.
then I was like, okay, I know the lungs are developed. I don't have to have any like no one has to intervene to make sure the baby's healthy enough. Now I'm ready to induce because I can't do this anymore. And so at 39, there was no way I was going to wait around to go into labor. Absolutely no way. I was not going to put my body through that.
Mm-hmm.
So I did induce and I did have him, but meditation was a big part of that pregnancy. I was constantly going to meditation and going to yoga. Um, and, when he was born, I was in labor like 12 hours. No, six, 14 or 15 hours. It was like 6 a.m. to 10 p.m., whatever
Okay.
that is. I can't do the math. Um, anyway, when he was born, oh my goodness, like, first of all, his skin was a different color than Rain's skin, because Rain was like almost 9 pounds and a full head of hair. She was a
Mm-hmm.
full term baby. So now
Yeah.
I was having another full term baby. He was bigger than she was, but I mean, his skin and his like everything, I just wanted to touch. And, you know, I was so grateful. But what had happened is after he was born, I, these are the PTSD things that come out, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
you're constantly just dealing with these things, the anxiety and so I would go to sleep and I would wake up and I'd be like, oh my God, he's dead. And then I look to the left and then there he was in the little nursing thing next to me, right? It just, the anxiety just, so I was realizing that my body was going through that for the entire pregnancy and now was still doing it. And interestingly, I had a really hard time nursing him because I couldn't produce any milk. And they
Mm-hmm.
were all saying it's because your body, because of PTSD, your body is so overstressed. It took me 2 months to finally get enough going that I was able to breastfeed him for a year. But I was starving him for the first 2 weeks and didn't even know
Right.
because my body wasn't functioning. I mean, when you talk about PTSD, like it took me 6 years for my body to get back to normal menstruation,
Mm-hmm.
all the things, 6 years. I tried everything in 6 years. And at the end of the day, it was my body had just gone under a severe amount of, you know, loss, stress, trauma. Trauma had, taken over my body. Um, it's crazy to think about that. And I will say one other thing to the journey is, so it was like yoga, meditation, journaling, like all these things. I have had psychedelic experiences as well. I
Okay.
have used yeah, I have used psilocybin 3 times
Mm-hmm.
with you're in a room with a therapist and you're there for like 6 hours laying in a bed and having it's like a movie happens. It was scary for me. The first hour was like horrible because I've never really been a drug user. I've never I don't smoke cigarettes. I drink once in a while. Like I'm not just it's not me. It's fine whatever anyone else wants to do, but I just don't care for it. So to let yourself go under a substance, well I should say a plant, I it was tough, but I've done it 3 times and each time has been years and years and years and years of therapy and yoga and meditation in one. I mean,
Right.
I think that all of my growth and the way I feel about my daughter now is all because of those psilocybin journeys. And I'm in such a better place than I was because I was just always carrying around this heavy thing that I
Yeah.
lost my daughter. And now it's like, I do have tears, but I understand it differently. So that's been a big part of my journey too. And, there's literature about PTSD and
Mm-hmm.
depression and psilocybin. And granted, I wasn't in a research study and I'm an N of one, but I believe that it works. I do believe it. I don't understand the science exactly behind it, um, but I absolutely am a believer.
Okay. You were saying about the therapist
hmm
that was not a like grief. I would say major, right?
Yeah,
Um,
grief counselor. Yeah, she wasn't.
that
Yeah.
counselor. And how hard is that to find a grief counselor? And did you try to find one?
I didn't really know that's what I needed. Like when you're going through that, you don't think, oh, I need to get someone who's an expert in grief. You just
Oh,
go to counseling. There's a care farm in Sedona, Arizona. So I live in Arizona in Phoenix. Two
okay.
hours from here is a care farm. It's called Sela Care Farm. And they have tons of animals that are abused: horses, alpaca, goats, pigs, cows, and they use the animals for grief. It is a complete care farm for grief. So you have to be a parent of a child that passed away. So it's for, child grief.
Right.
And so we've spent a lot of time there. And the woman that runs that, her name is Dr. Joanne Cacciatore. She's a professor at ASU. Um, Oprah and Harry had this thing on TV and she was in it. Like she's
Mhm.
pretty well known internationally, but she is an international grief expert. She's written amazing books on the topic that I've read, and she's the one that made me realize I could use a grief counselor. And she would counsel me because we're friends.
Okay.
um, she would counsel me, but then I ended up with one of her trained counselors here in Phoenix and spent years with her. And it's a whole different thing when you're talking to a grief counselor than someone who's not an expert in grief. It's not a negative thing. It's just like a doctor.
Oh,
Some doctors are pediatricians and other doctors are skin doctors. Skin doctors shouldn't really be treating children with the flu, right? It doesn't make sense. But I'm sure they're a good doctor. So it's like
mhm.
therapists can be good, but they sometimes they have these expertise areas. These counselors are experts in grief. They really understand it.
Okay.
And so very helpful.
And how long did you spend with a grief counselor specifically?
Years. I don't know, 4 or 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
The woman's name is Terry Weibel. She's actually gotten a lot of awards here in Phoenix, but um, for her counseling, she has her own counseling center around grief here in Phoenix. But yeah, it was life changing, and she had a stillborn baby.
Okay, so she knows.
She knew, yeah. I mean, not all grief counselors have had that, but even Joanne Cacciatore, the woman who owns the farm, she had a stillborn baby.
Mm.
Cheyenne was her daughter's name, which is why she created the farm, because of her own grief. And yeah, so people do these things out of passion. When I had my daughter, while I was figuring out how I was going to heal, because I did not know, I was just living my life. I was a professor. And thankfully, the dean of the college gave me 6 months off of work. I'm so grateful for that, paid.
Mm.
So amazing. They basically gave me my maternity leave and then some,
Yeah,
um, which was important and I think needs to be heard by people, because when you go through a stillborn baby, just because the baby's not there, your body's still producing milk. My body was post pregnancy. So I would go to Target and I looked like I just had a baby, but I had no baby.
yeah,
And somebody's baby would cry and my milk would let down and I had no baby. So it's like people don't think of those things, and you have to have time to rest and be alone and grieve and go through all the things. You can't be forced back into normal everyday things. So I was very, very, very grateful for that. Um, but one thing I did do is I was a women's health researcher. I always have been very passionate about women's health, and mostly around physical activity and changing behavior and improving self-esteem so that you take care of your body and you don't, gain weight over the years and all those things. And I had a program that I did with women, and I just said to myself, okay, like, I just had a stillborn baby. Like, what are some things that I'm going to do to get better? Like, number one, I want to have another baby. And most women do want to have another baby. But what happens, this is all being in my science brain, my health brain, was like women, they're depressed. They have post traumatic stress. Like, So what are they doing? Sitting around, eating unhealthy, not taking care of themselves. So I decided I was going to do an intervention for moms who had had stillbirth nationally. So
Mm-hmm.
I would run this program where nationally women around the US could get online, and we would have the intervention that I use for physical activity behavior before the baby. I twisted it a little bit for stillborn moms, and tried to help stillborn moms start to do positive health behavior changes so they could get ready when they were emotionally ready. They could be physically ready for the next baby. Um, and then I also was doing yoga. So I was like, oh, well, if it's helpful for me, it has to be helpful for at least one other woman. So again, I should do research on using yoga for moms for stillbirth for PTSD. So I wrote an NIH grant. I partnered with a yoga site called Udaya, Udaya. It exists currently. I'm in some of their yoga videos. I went to Bulgaria and I was in their videos. Yeah, 2 years in a row. Um, the gentleman that owned it, he owns it, Yuriv, he gave me 100 free memberships to do research with stillborn moms who had had stillborn babies using yoga. I went to the NIH. I asked for, just short of $1 million to do this study, and they turned me down. I was told that it was a horrible idea. Don't bother resubmitting the grant. It's garbage. I remember getting off the phone with the program officer and just crying. And then I was like, no, I'm going to resubmit this. I'm going to fix it and I'm going to resubmit it. And I did, and it got funded.
Oh, wow.
So I got like $850,000, $900,000 to do a national study. I have publications on the benefits of yoga for stillbirth moms,
Mm-hmm.
quantitative data and interview data. And so I was really like trying to do things for others too. At the time, though, I thought it was like healing. It wasn't. It was putting a band-aid on my own. And I'm like, it's basically like, go to work, don't think about it. So I'm like, I'm helping others, I'm doing good. And that's where the journey started, where it's like, holy crud, it took me years to go, okay, Jen, it's time to do the work now. Um, it took me a long time. Like my last psilocybin ceremony was within a year. So I've had psilocybin ceremonies like once a year for like the last 3 years, and she's 14. So, it took me 9 to 10 years to get more serious about, okay, how long am I going to carry this in my body, and how long am I going to feel heavy with this? So it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, wow. It seems like it really takes a lot of time, and maybe we really do not take this as serious as it should be taken. Like these traumatic experiences of loss, especially these ones. It's
Hmm.
something like weirdly and unexpectedly and stuff. It's real trauma, I guess.
Yeah. And I feel like I don't always like, well, I mean, I'll go to bed at night and I'll lay down and I close my eyes and my youngest kid is in a car accident, or I lay down and I go to bed and my brother committed suicide. Random thoughts,
Yeah,
random thoughts. That
I,
is post traumatic stress. That is anxiety. And like, I have to be honest to say that those things are happening, because there's all these people out in this world that don't have mental health expertise, that aren't running science for digital mental health companies, that have no ability to understand that what they're going through is completely normal. And even when you're getting help and assistance, you will go up and down. You're a human being. So when are those thoughts going to stop? I don't really know. My child's about to start driving, my oldest. That's my biggest thing, is I've got to stop dreaming of these things. But
yeah,
it naturally happens. So then I have to talk to myself, and then I have to write in my journal, or sometimes I just have a good cry, you know? So I think it's one of those things where it's like you don't get fixed. You
I,
learn how to manage, and you learn how to be kind to yourself. You learn how to find people who support you and hold space for you when you need it. Um, every year for my daughter's birthday, the same 10 girls come to my home every year for the last 10 years. And we celebrate her and we do a meditation and we do journaling all together. And then I serve a lunch. Same girls. We just did it because her birthday was January 27th. I mean, it's really such a beautiful thing. And all these women hold space for me. Um,
And how did you
so,
meet? How did you meet these women?
through school, like my kids' school, their parents and my kids' school, and we've just become friends. That's in most cases. A couple of them I met in yoga class,
Hmm.
or yoga teachers. And interestingly, and this is just a little side note, but one of the women I had been friends with for like 3 months, I hadn't shared my personal story. And we were together, her husband and myself, and she and my husband on a double date. And I had asked her what she was going to do for Mother's Day, and she started crying. And I looked at my husband and I thought, that's weird that she's crying. And then I was like, uh-oh. And then like thinking like, what have I done, And then she told me that she had a daughter that was stillborn between
Okay.
her two boys. Her oldest boy is 1 year younger than my oldest son. Her youngest son is the exact same age to the day as my son. They're called rainbow babies. And they were best friends in school. And I was sitting there, and then everybody's crying because we're just like, we've known each other and we've been social together and we like each other. And to have the exact same, hers was different, obviously. Like her father was dying and she was ignoring signs and things that, she's had her own journey, but she's the most beautiful woman, most beautiful family. And now we have this sisterhood, if you will, over this, her daughter Marjorie and my daughter Rain. It's like it's unmatched. Nobody's going to beat that sisterhood, no matter what. Like, there's no way. I mean, there's a bond there that you can't even. And to think we were friends before that, it's just so weird. But she's in that little group, and she's a parent at the school that my kids go to school in.
Wow, that's quite a story. Seems like coincidentally happening, right?
Yeah,
But kind of very right thing that's happening. Okay, I have another question. You mentioned your research and about yoga and things like that. Was it implemented in some, I don't know, programs or digital tools or anywhere at some level, maybe, I don't know, anywhere in
yeah.
organizations or I don't know, maybe not
So
state.
yeah. So it was on this website, Udaya. So you would log into the website and you would go and you would find the classes for
Mhm.
stillborn moms. We actually use the money to produce classes for stillborn moms. So the things that were said in the classes were safe and and kind and compassionate for stillborn moms. Because if you think about it, sometimes in yoga, shavasana, right? They call that corpse pose. Do you think
Yes.
we want to be calling corpse pose for people who are grieving? No, you do not. So I hired three teachers from Udaya from that, and they had to write the yoga classes for that, and they had to share the transcript with me before they taught it, so I could approve it. We could approve it for quote unquote, like, um we didn't want to stir up anything. They were supposed to be in a healing place, you
Mm,
know so
yeah.
that's an example, right? Or child's pose. Sometimes women get upset about child's pose. You have to be super sensitive to the this is in anything in life, right? Any traumatic experience, you have to be thinking about the audience and what their triggers might be. And yeah, and we interviewed women too. We didn't just make it up.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Um, what do you think? helped you maybe the most in the very, very beginning of your grieving journey?
Yoga. It was definitely yoga. I mean, it was the
And
only thing I had.
right, and did you start it like right away or in some time?
Well, it was interesting. My therapist, I kept feeling like every time I went, it was like the Band-Aid was ripped off. And then I
Mm,
would be upset for a week and then I'd go back to session and then I get upset for like it was like not really it wasn't conducive, it just wasn't working. And she told me to try yoga. And I was like, "Ugh, I'm not trying yoga." And I remember because I was living in Omaha, Nebraska, and I was like, all right, I'm going to go to this yoga class. So I went to the gym because I have a PhD in exercise physiology. So I've been exercising my whole life. So I went to the gym that day and I got on the Stairmaster and I started doing the Stairmaster and then I lifted weights. And then I decided I was going to go to that yoga class, but I had to work out first because I wasn't going to get a workout in yoga because that's where my head was. Like, I got to get a workout.
mm,
I got to yoga class. That thing was so hard. I was like, I am going to die. And this is the last time I do the Stairmaster and lift weights before I go to yoga class. It was a specific type of yoga called power yoga, kind of like also Ashtanga yoga, where you hold poses for a longer period of time. In this studio, there was no music and
mm-hmm.
it was 90 minutes. There's no heat. You build your own heat and no
Right.
music, just your breath. That's how
Okay.
I learned yoga. So I didn't learn yoga in a studio where
Mm,
they're playing loud music and it's 92 degrees and you're sweating like crazy. And, I learned in a more traditional way. And then I became yoga teacher trained. I got yoga teacher training because I wanted to learn more about the other part of yoga because yoga isn't just the physical practice, it's all the pieces. And the physical practice was great, but I wanted to learn about all the other things. And so I got 500 hours certified. So I technically can teach yoga. Do
mm,
I? No. Like maybe to my brother when I'm visiting him in California, we'll go to the park and the grass and I teach us a yoga class. But and Joanne has invited me to the farm to teach yoga to the women that come there. But I'm maybe one day, but not right now.
and where did you get certified?
Like just well, I took it depends on, different places have different trainings, but mine was with Cheryl Oliver is her name. And her ex-husband is a very well-known yoga teacher in Phoenix. He's trained all the teachers. His son, John Salisbury, is currently my yoga teacher. Um, so I've been in their like lineage following them, and a lot of people in Phoenix have. Like you go to a class and you'll say, "Hey, have you been to this class before?" "Oh yeah, I've been following him for 20 years." And that's like a normal thing. So they have
Oh,
a pretty good following.
is there a go-to place where you can, okay, figure it out? What I should do if this happens
Yeah.
to me?
That's a really good question because for a while I would when I was doing this research, I was going into hospitals and I was talking to audiences of 60 to 100 nurses and doctors about the research behind stillbirth and PTSD. And then I was also telling my personal story at the same time.
Yeah,
So it was a very good way because it was real lived experience and also science. And so they have to listen. You know what I mean? They don't have a choice. And so one of the things that I used to bring up is the lack of resources. So I think that, well, in this case, it depends on the hospital you have your child in. If you have your child in the hospital, right? Like, but you pretty much have to do your homework. I mean, when they gave me my list of groups to reach out to, all of them were non existent anymore.
okay.
It was
Oh,
like an outdated list that was ridiculous. So it's just like, so I had to go and find foundations for stillborn moms. That's a horrible way to operate for someone that's like at the bottom of the barrel in their feelings and their and despair, right?
yeah.
Um, so I think that's the problem. That is the problem. I have a PhD. So I know how to go do research and but what about the woman that doesn't? Right? Like it's like doesn't have an education about how to be a advocate for themselves in the healthcare system or doesn't know where to go. They're, they go to their church maybe and that's it. Like and in churches some of the people there have some experience with these mental health things, but majority do not. And I know this because I'm writing a grant about this right now.
Okay.
Um so I just think that no, there are not necessarily clear resources. And two, women have to advocate for themselves because, again, one hospital down the road might have an amazing support for stillbirth moms, and the other one down the road has nothing or everything's outdated and they don't really care. And so it's like, which one you end up birthing your child at?
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. What do you think about peer support and support groups? Have you tried these ones?
You know, I have not, and I don't want to. And the reason I don't want to is because when I have just been in like little groups or something similar, not like a scheduled group, but it's like every woman has their own story
Yeah.
and their own version of what happened. And at the time when I was really um, just miserable, basically, it was really hard to listen to other people's stories because I had my own I had to figure out. Like it clouded too many things. It's like, oh, like, to listen to this woman's story is so sad. And then it's like, then I have my own story that's so sad. And it was just too much for me. I'm an empathetic person. And so I would like take in that. And it's just like the weight was already heavy enough. It's interesting. Like I have a friend right now who's going through a divorce and I feel so bad for her husband. She needs to get a divorce, and he's an amazing guy, but he has his own mental health or whatever things and he needs to figure out himself. But I feel like I'm so empathetic. I feel I want to cry for him a lot. So I couldn't do that. I had to have my own bubble to take care of myself. I was so depleted. Um, and then I will be completely honest and say, sometimes in those groups, there's women who have miscarriages and some women who have stillbirth. And for me, that was very difficult because I'm not trying to say that one trauma is better or worse than the other, but it is different to lose a baby at 8 weeks versus carry a full term baby, give birth to the baby, hold the baby, and the baby is not breathing. It's just two different experiences. You can't compare them. And so
Yeah.
I didn't like going to groups where they were comparing those things. Just felt
Okay.
like, and some stillbirth advocates will say you should not be combining. But a lot of this is where we get back to resources. These groups are lost. So they call miscarriage loss and they call stillbirth loss.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to be careful about these words that you're using.
Right. That's
Death
true.
of a baby versus loss, maybe. You see
Yeah.
what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just, it's hard and it depends on who you talk to and what their version of the story is. And I just couldn't deal with all of it. It was way too overwhelming. So I have not ever done it for me. I do know women that love them.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And what about these groups? How do you find these ones?
Same as the other, like you either get a list from the hospital and hope that they're still running, or you call these foundations and find out if there's a local chapter and if they have support. The Care Farm in Sedona, the Sela Care Farm, they have a website and they have stuff all over the country. And so you can go to their website and get information from them. Um,
Mhm.
yeah.
So it seems like a piece of work. What do you think is missing from the current support
I
system?
mean, I just think that it needs to be taken more seriously and the documents that they give a pregnant woman about like what to eat when you're pregnant and signing up for your baby class where you learn how to change a diaper and use a car seat and all the things. It's like that's important to every hospital. They update it all the time. They keep the latest information and safety standards. They should be doing the same thing with stillbirth, but they don't. So I think that's the biggest thing is the upkeep. Again, this is like PTSD is a mental health issue and it can lead to so many other problems. And we have to be taking it seriously, you know, even offering mental health resources, not even related to stillbirth, but just mental health resources, like in any situation, right? Who do I call? Where do I go? Um, so that's what they should be doing, taking it more seriously, I think. And even in the way you're cared for after the stillbirth. So, like when I was pregnant with Nolan, it's like I could have given you a list of things they could have done better. Like, um, you know, just when I was trying to get pregnant, sitting in a room with all these women who were pregnant, or the night I gave birth to Rain, they kept me in the delivery room for a day and a half and then let me go home. So I was listening to, so my baby had passed at 10 o'clock that morning. And that night I slept in the delivery room. So I was listening to babies being born the entire night.
Oh God. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that was trauma enough right there. Right. So it's like, why are hospitals not thinking of these things? And
Okay. Yeah, yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, I feel like it's just like in sports, they don't have a mental health person that's like, like the big thing now in sports is like have a mental health advocate and have a mental health coach and da 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 da, and everybody's hiring a mental health person. But it's like, who's going to be the person on each floor that handles mental health? Where is that
Right.
person? No matter
And
what it is.
when you say they should handle it, who exactly do you think is this um, organization or go to someone? Is this
I mean, hospital administration.
okay? Hospital administration. They should, right?
Yes.
Okay. Or it should it be some kind of a part of insurance, your provider or something? I mean, in technical
Yeah.
terms, who should be
Yeah.
responsible?
Yeah. I mean, it just depends on obviously the insurance company, That's a really good point. I've never really thought about that. And there might be some that do have it, and there might be some that don't.
Right.
Um, but that's a really good point. I know when my daughter was born, we had to pay all the same bills that everybody else did, and all the tests we had to have. We had to pay for all those. Nobody cared that she died. There was no, you would think that even financially they might like, okay, maybe reduce your.
Yeah.
They held us accountable for every penny. Took us years to pay it off because of all the tests and all the
Yeah.
things.
Right,
Yeah.
right, right.
So
Absolutely.
you're already dealing with your emotions, and then you have this exorbitant hospital bill that you weren't expecting to have. And insurance only covers so much of that stuff. So yeah, you're correct.
Yeah, it's so weird that you have so much, so much to process and to.
I mean, yeah, the morning she passed, 10 a.m. and by 11 a.m. someone was asking me if I was going to cremate her or bury her.
Right.
And I asked them to leave my room. And I said, I don't have an answer for you. You'll have to wait until I'm ready to answer the question.
Yeah. Were you alone at the time or with your
My
family?
husband was in there. That's it.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. We had an amazing nurse.
Mhm.
She dressed Rain. She got Rain dressed, and she would bring her out to me like in increments because, I was having like physical reactions, and like it was very hard. Um And then towards the like when we were holding her, and then she would take her for a while, like try to preserve her, and then bring her back. I think it was like the third or fourth time. I was like, should I hold her one more time? And she's like, I don't recommend it. And then I knew it was done. But she was the most amazing nurse, and she delivered Nolan with the doctor.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, I remember because I had been in labor like 12 hours, and the doctor was like, we need to do a C-section. And she was standing behind the doctor telling me, don't do it. And she was pointing to the clock, like, just let it happen. And I trusted her. And
Mm-hmm.
then she had to clock out. Her shift was over because we had scheduled the birth that day because she was working.
Yeah.
So she had to clock out and she left. And 30 minutes later, he came out by himself. No
Oh,
C-section.
wow. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
we've kept in touch with her, like via Facebook. And she was the most amazing woman. And those were the stories I used to tell the nurses.
That's so
So,
good. Yeah.
yeah.
How important do you think is telling your story?
Yeah, I mean, I think that sometimes I get a little nervous, like I recently posted on LinkedIn about my daughter, and I have like a pretty good amount of followers. And so it's like, and I'm a businesswoman and I'm marketing myself constantly. And it's kind of one of those things where this is who I am. This is my story. This
Mm-hmm.
is how I ended up in mental health. This is
Right.
how I ended up in complementary approaches to mental health. Um, this is how I took charge of my own career and why I left being a professor and went to Calm because I was using the meditation app Calm for some
Uh,
of this. So it's my part of my story. Um, and if people are uncomfortable, I've learned that that's their issue, not mine.
that's so true.
And I do have a lot of women come to me privately and say, this similar thing happened to me. I would never talk about it, but you are helping me heal. So it's my story. It's part of who I am and it's made me who I am. And so, yeah, I just kind of have to stand behind it. When it first happened, I used to be embarrassed. I didn't want to tell people. Um, I was worried what they would think about me. But now I'm just like, that's not really that has nothing to do with me. That's your own issues,
That's so
you
true.
know? And I'm a better person because of this, because I am way more compassionate and empathetic for people who you don't have to have loss. Just anything that you think like I am. Before it would be like, oh, I'm so sorry. And then you move on. But now it's like, should I send that person a card? What could I do that could make that person feel special in the moment? Or I'll think like, someone goes through something very difficult. 3 months later, I'm like, now's the time to send a card because everybody's gone back to how they're living because I've experienced that. And I do have a lot of people reaching out to me who have friends or family that experience something and they're like, what should I do? And then I just tell them.
Yeah.
So I feel like all these ways are helping support other people and spreading love to other people.
I
So,
think so important. People are very often like you mentioned, they are not telling. They are scared of telling, but that's what really helps at the end of the day, telling it and sort of processing it.
mhm. People used to ask me if I was like shameful that, where I blamed myself for the stillbirth. Like,
Oh,
do you ever blame yourself? And I was like, no, why would I blame myself? But
yeah,
in my psilocybin journey, I learned that I was blaming myself. And I was basically, my body didn't do what it was supposed to do. But if you think about it, my body did do it with what it was supposed to do, right? Like, so I did have some internal shame about it, but really my body did all the things it was supposed to do. It grew a baby. And there's so much beauty in that, right?
that's
So I
amazing.
just have to hold on to that, right? Um, but it's interesting. That's why I think the psilocybin is so healing, because it brings things to the surface so that you can you know move through those things.
Right. That's so true.
Yeah,
Okay, then I guess that's a really beautiful story.
I
Thank
appreciate it.
you much for telling this one. I truly appreciate for the trust that you've given, and I feel you here because yeah, I guess that. there's some kind of empathy between people who had these traumatic experiences, because I really know what you mean about like all these thoughts that are in your head, because I also have it. And yeah, it takes time, and I'm not sure that it's going away for me as well.
Hmm.
But yeah, that's what is sort of making us, right?
Yeah, for sure. I'm practicing, you know,
Right.
we're human beings. We're here to practice. That's all we can do.
Okay, then thank you very, very much. And
Yes, thank you.
yeah,
And we'll
thank you very
talk soon.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Bye bye.
Okay. Bye.